Hello, welcome to the Bible K through 12, and this is the first grade Bible. Now, this is not child's play, this is for adults, especially adults who don't have a clue what the Bible is all about. And so we are going to be going into greater depth with each lesson. This lesson is going to begin a series that will go on into the next few grade levels about what I call the skeleton of the Old Testament. And by that I mean it is what sort of holds the Old Testament together. And everything, whether it's a psalm, a proverb, a prophecy, has a relationship ultimately to the storyline that is the skeleton. And so today I'm beginning the storyline of really the Hebrew or Israelite nation. That begins in the book of Genesis, and it follows up on a series of genealogies, brief genealogies, that get some clans and nations started as the offspring of Noah. So in the 10th and 11th chapters of Genesis, you especially see that pattern. So in the 10th chapter, 32nd verse, it says, "These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies in their nations. And from these the nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood." Now, one of those nations started with a man by the name of Terah. And Terah had three sons, one of them by the name of Abraham. Now, Terah originated in the city of Ur. That was a prominent city in the area of Mesopotamia, that is the area between the rivers, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It was in the southeast part of that area, which is now Iraq. I happened to come across a book years ago written by a man named Woolley who excavated the city of Ur. And one of the stories he told really stuck with me. It told about how a prominent man of Ur was buried, and when he was buried with his slaves. They were killed and kept in the burial vault with him so that they could serve him in the afterlife. Now, what you see in that, first of all, is the pagan understanding of the afterlife, and also you see little disregard or little regard for human life. And that's the culture from which this family came. So Terah left Ur and he moved northwest to the city of Haran, Haran, and there he died. Abraham left Haran and went to the city, or to the land of Canaan. And that was the land that God directed him to go to. We find in the 12th chapter of Genesis that God says to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now, one of the things that we see in a very general way from this passage is two things. First of all, that Abraham had encounters with God. This is not the only time where God speaks to Abraham. And in fact, we find a number of other people in the Bible who have encounters with God. We don't know exactly the nature of those encounters. How did Abraham hear from God? Was it just something in his heart? Did he hear an audible voice? We don't know. But he had encounters with God. And we find that God made certain promises to Abraham and to other people. And when he did, we find that Abraham acted on those promises. Those promises shaped his life. And we find that true of other people. So encounters with God, promises, and acting on those promises was a pattern that we see in the Old Testament as well as the New. So what we find is that Abraham went to the land of Canaan. He made a brief journey down into Egypt and went back to Canaan and lived out his life there. He and his wife Sarah had a son. The whole story of how that son was born, a child of promise, makes up a big part of the book of Genesis. That son's name was Isaac. And Isaac grew up, had a wife by the name of Rebekah, and they had two sons, Jacob and Esau. Esau plays a rather minor role, important role, but a minor role. But Jacob is the focus of the story from that point on. And eventually, Jacob had wives, plural, as well as concubines. Remember, this is a culture that is pretty foreign to our own culture. And he ended up having 12 sons. He also had a daughter by the name of Dinah, who played a rather minor role. But these 12 sons ultimately became the patriarchs or the leaders of their families and the clans that came out of those sons. And they became known as the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, the fact that they were called of Israel is because Jacob's name got changed. That's a whole big story in itself. And so his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. And the 12 sons of Israel became the 12 tribes of Israel. right at the end of the book of Genesis, through a long, complex story, as all these stories throughout Genesis are, the uh, whole family moved down to Egypt. They went down to Egypt, uh, which was south and west of the land of Canaan, sort of around the corner of the Mediterranean. And there they took up residence. They were blessed there in the land of Egypt, and they stayed there for a long time. And that's sort of where the story ends in the book of Genesis. Now, I want us quickly to remember the locations. Southeast, city of Ur. Northwest, the city or the area of Haran. And then back somewhat southwest of that was the land of Canaan, which was sort of between the Mediterranean and the River Jordan. And so those were the major lands of importance. But then they end up as sort of guests in the land of Egypt. And that's the end of the book of Genesis.